Now, Prince Harry is reportedly very sad that Prince Archie and Princess Lilibet are missing out on life with the rest of their family, and that the extensive family network that their cousins are enjoying while his children aren't.
The decree had existed for years, sealed beneath the king's private authority, and hidden from almost everyone who might have tried to stop it. But when Charles finally placed his signature beneath its final clause, the consequences were immediate. Meghan's children were stripped of their royal status. Their formal place within the monarchy was removed, and a family conflict that had once seemed private became a historic act of separation. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles sat in silence as the clock moved deeper into evening. Two constitutional advisors remained, neither daring to interrupt the pause over the desk. The royal decree, a formal order issued under the monarch's authority, carried an earlier date beneath its seal, proof that this decision had been prepared long before that night. He lifted the pen, stopped, and stared at the final clause. It would change how Archie and Lilibet were recognized forever. The pen touched the page. Nobody in the room moved. With that motion, the king removed the children's official royal status and ended their right to be presented as prince and princess within the monarchy's formal structure. One advisor lowered his eyes while the other watched duty cross into personal loss. Charles had acted with certainty, yet the silence felt less like victory and more like grief. Meghan read the notice twice after it arrived at home. She stood motionless, pressing one finger against the paragraph, confirming the decision was permanent, not temporary. Harry asked what it said, but she did not answer. Her anger came first, sharp and controlled, followed by something colder, fear that their children had been separated from a heritage they never chose to abandon. A handwritten amendment deepened the shock. Charles had added it years earlier, preserving the power to activate the decree if a future rupture threatened the crown's control over royal identity. A documented palace account later recorded that one courtier noticed a darker phrase buried in the text: breach of dynastic trust. Dynastic trust meant the expectation that royal names, titles, and family standing would be protected from private use or outside control. Harry demanded the evidence behind that accusation. Then a confidential message reached him, linking the decree to a private incident involving the children's royal identities years before. Suddenly, the signature was not the beginning of the crisis. It was the consequence of a secret decision the family had never confronted. The signature shocked the world, but the deepest wound was still hidden inside the people who now had to choose between protecting their children and confronting the crown. Behind the constitutional language were four people bound by blood and divided by choices they could no longer undo. Meghan saw the decree as an attack on her children. Harry saw it as proof that his place inside the family had finally collapsed. Charles viewed it as a painful duty delayed for too long. And William understood that whatever happened next would determine whether the monarchy survived as a family or only as an institution. Meghan placed the decree flat on the table and looked directly at Harry. "They have judged our children for decisions they never made," she said, her anger steady, but barely containing something deeper. Royal status did not give Archie and Lilibet political power. It gave them formal recognition, ceremonial identity, public connection to the crown, and a permanent place in the family's official record. To her, removing it felt like Britain itself had been pulled away from them. Harry did not follow when she left the room. He remained seated, staring at his father's signature and remembering private promises made during earlier family talks. Charles had once assured him that the children would never be dragged into the conflict between adults. Now that promise seemed broken. The decree felt personal, precise, and final. It did not merely change titles. It told him that the family structure he had trusted no longer protected his son or daughter. Charles waited for confirmation inside the same private office where the order had been signed. When an advisor quietly told him the formal notice had reached Meghan, the king asked no further questions. He turned away and rested one hand against the desk. A documented account from the room later described the silence as heavy and deliberate. He believed the decision was necessary, yet necessity did nothing to soften the fact that his grandchildren would carry its consequences. William prepared to meet his father with a copy of the decree already marked by legal notes. The future king discovered that its foundation had been created before Archie and Lilibet publicly began using royal titles. That detail changed everything. It meant the palace had not reacted in panic. It had prepared for this possibility in secret, waiting for a moment serious enough to activate the hidden plan. The prince felt the danger immediately. Meghan saw punishment. Harry saw betrayal. Charles saw duty. William saw protection, but even he could not ignore the human cost. Then he found a sealed reference attached to the original draft, naming one private event as the reason the decree had moved from contingency to action. To understand why a grandfather crossed a line he had resisted for years, the story must return to the moment when trust inside the monarchy finally broke beyond repair. The decree was not born on the night it was signed. Its true beginning lay in a private family ceremony years earlier, when a seemingly small disagreement became evidence of a much larger plan. No cameras recorded the confrontation. No official statement acknowledged it. Yet those present would later remember one sentence, one folder, and one closed door, as the moment Charles decided he might someday have to separate the children's identity from the crown. Harry had pressed his father for certainty long before the final order appeared. He wanted written guarantees that Archie and Lilibet's titles would remain protected, whatever happened between their parents and the palace. Charles resisted, not because he wished to punish the children, but because he believed trust had to come before constitutional promises. A constitutional promise meant a formal commitment tied to the rules governing royal status, not merely a private assurance between relatives. Meghan heard caution and understood rejection. To her, every delay suggested that the family still viewed her children as conditional members of the royal line. Their connection to the crown was deeply personal, but it also carried public value, ceremonial meaning, and global recognition. That made the dispute dangerous. The palace wanted that identity controlled by duty, while she wanted the freedom to shape it beyond palace walls. The private naming and heritage ceremony at Windsor became the point of no return. Meghan arrived carrying a prepared folder and placed it before Charles after the formal family remarks had ended. Inside was a declaration stating that the children's royal titles could be used independently in future media, charitable work, and commercial projects without palace approval. A heritage ceremony was a private gathering intended to recognize family identity and lineage. It was never meant to create a separate authority over the crown's name. Charles read the document once, then again. Harry watched his father's expression harden as Meghan insisted that control over the children's identity belonged to their parents. The king closed the folder and answered with one sentence: "The crown cannot become inherited branding." She did not move. He did not soften it. The closed door changed everything. Later that night, the monarch instructed his private secretary to retrieve a dormant decree drafted during the earliest constitutional dispute. A documented palace account recorded that he still refused to activate it, believing Archie and Lilibet should not suffer because the adults had lost trust. But the folder was preserved, sealed, and placed where it could be reached again. Years later, that same document returned inside Charles's red box, the locked case used to carry official papers requiring the sovereign's attention. This time, new evidence had been attached. What had once looked like a warning now appeared to be proof. What began as a disagreement over identity was now ready to erupt into a face-to-face reckoning between a mother defending her children and a monarch defending the crown. There were no cameras, no advisors seated between them, and no carefully prepared palace language to soften what had happened. Meghan entered the room, carrying the decree in one hand, and years of resentment in the other. Charles remained standing behind a chair, refusing to begin with ceremony. When she placed the document before him and accused him of punishing two children for their parents' choices, the monarchy's private war finally found its voice. Meghan had demanded the meeting at Clarence House because she would no longer accept answers through lawyers, courtiers, or formal notices. Clarence House was the king's London residence, but that afternoon it became something more dangerous, the place where private anger met royal power without protection. Harry waited nearby, deliberately excluded from the first exchange, because Charles wanted to face the person he believed had pushed the battle over the children's identity beyond repair. The decree struck the table with a sharp finality. "You have punished them for us," Meghan said, pushing the pages toward him. She did not raise her voice, but the words landed harder because they were controlled. The king looked down at his signature and felt the human cost behind the legal language. Archie and Lilibet had made no choices, broken no promises, and yet their names now carried the consequence. Charles answered slowly. He said the children had never been the target, but their royal position could not be used outside the crown's authority. The crown meant the monarchy as an institution, including its titles, duties, and public identity, not simply the person wearing it. Meghan rose from her chair and accused him of turning family love into obedience. She told him that acceptance inside this family always seemed to come with conditions. The king did not argue. Instead, he opened a second folder and placed the original Windsor ceremony document beside the decree. Meghan recognized her signature immediately. The palace had kept the signed copy for years, preserving the exact words that had once been dismissed as a private disagreement. Charles said nothing as she read it again. A second page changed everything. Meghan froze when she saw a confidential strategy note attached behind the original declaration. It discussed how the children's titles could strengthen future international ventures, including media partnerships and charitable projects beyond palace approval. A documented account from the meeting later recorded that her expression shifted from anger to disbelief. Harry entered before either of them could speak again. He saw the strategy page, then looked directly at Meghan. He knew at once that the palace could not have obtained it alone. Someone close to them had secretly delivered the evidence to Charles, and that betrayal now stood between every person in the room. Meghan had come prepared to challenge the king, but the document on his table revealed that another hand had quietly shaped the decision from within the family itself. Charles may have signed the decree, but he did not reach the decision alone. Behind the sealed doors stood a quiet alliance of family authority, constitutional advice, and personal loyalty. William wanted the monarchy protected from future exploitation. Anne demanded that royal identity remain tied to service. Yet the most surprising influence came from someone who understood that removing the children's status might save the crown while destroying the last fragile bridge to Harry. William reviewed the order alone before allowing his name to stand behind it. The prince understood that the king could regulate royal styles through formal instruments, meaning official documents used to change titles, recognition, and ceremonial position. But authority alone was not enough. Every clause had to prevent legal confusion, public contradiction, and resistance inside the institution. One careless sentence could turn a private family crisis into a constitutional battle. Anne read the decree separately and reached the same hard conclusion. The children had to remain protected as individuals, even if their official status was removed. She told Charles that royal identity could not exist without service, duty, and responsibility to the crown. Yet the princess also warned him that Archie and Lilibet must never be treated as guilty for choices made by adults. Her support was firm, but it was not cold. William found the most severe paragraph and crossed it out. That clause would have restricted the children's future access to family gatherings, memorials, and private royal occasions. He knew Harry would interpret his involvement as another act of rivalry, perhaps even revenge. Still, the future king refused to let constitutional separation become personal exile. Protecting the institution mattered. Protecting two children from total rejection mattered more. Anne left the meeting after telling her brother that delay had become more dangerous than action. She remained alone in the corridor for several moments, carrying the weight of what she had endorsed. Duty had guided her decision, but duty could not erase the fact that innocent names would now disappear from the royal order. Camilla had offered the strongest warning. The Queen Consort urged Charles not to sign immediately, telling him that history would remember the emotional cruelty more clearly than the legal reasoning. She understood that the public might forget every constitutional clause, while remembering only a grandfather removing status from his grandchildren. Her warning shook him, but it did not stop him. The decisive evidence came from a former Sussex advisor. In a documented private account, the advisor explained that the confidential strategy page had been delivered after concerns grew that the children's titles might be built into future commercial negotiations. That page transformed suspicion into proof and gave the monarch the final reason to act. Meghan understood the truth before leaving Britain. Personal pressure would not reverse a decision supported by family authority, legal preparation, and evidence from inside her own circle. The decree had already moved beyond Charles alone. The battle over the signature was finished. Now every privilege, invitation, record, and family relationship connected to that signature began to change. The fallout did not begin with shouting. It began with silence, and two names disappearing from an official page. By morning, palace staff had received revised instructions. Ceremonial records were being amended, and invitations once written with royal styles were quietly replaced. Meghan watched the change happen in real time. Harry made one desperate call to his father, and Charles discovered that even a decree signed in certainty could leave a room filled with regret. Meghan refreshed the royal family's official page and watched the change appear before her. Archie's title vanished first. Lilibet's followed moments later. Royal styles were the formal titles used to show a person's recognized position within the monarchy, and their removal meant the children could no longer be officially presented as prince and princess. She stared at their personal names, closed the laptop sharply, and whispered that the palace had erased them without allowing them to understand why. Palace staff moved quickly. Official letters were rewritten, ceremonial precedence was revised, and household instructions were changed, so the children would no longer be treated as representatives of the crown. Ceremonial precedence meant the formal order in which members of the royal family were placed during official events. Archie and Lilibet remained connected to the family by blood, but the institution would no longer speak or act in their names. Harry called his father before the first public statement was released. He asked Charles to delay the change until the children were old enough to understand what had been taken from them. The king listened without interrupting, then said the decree had already taken effect. It could not be used as a warning, paused as pressure, or withdrawn once emotions settled. His voice remained controlled, but after the call ended, he stayed seated, with the receiver still in his hand. The next blow arrived through a revised summer invitation. A planned stay at Balmoral was withdrawn and replaced with a private family invitation stripped of royal protocol. Balmoral was the monarch's Scottish residence, traditionally used for private family gatherings, as well as royal hospitality. The message was painfully clear. The children were still welcome as relatives, but not as recognized members of the institution. Harry then discovered that his own status had been deliberately left untouched. That detail made the decision feel less like a broad constitutional reform and more like a precise intervention aimed at the next generation. Meghan saw control. He saw strategy. Charles called it protection, but the distinction only deepened the anger. Furious with both sides, Harry requested a meeting with William alone. He needed to know whether his brother had defended the children, supported the decree, or helped design the boundary now separating them from the crown. With the children's names altered, and the palace machinery already moving, only one private conversation remained capable of changing the meaning of what Charles had done. For once, no private secretary prepared the words. No lawyer reviewed the room. No palace official stood close enough to interrupt. Harry and William met as brothers, carrying the memory of the same mother and the burden of completely different futures. Harry wanted an admission that the decree was revenge. William wanted him to understand that the children had become trapped inside a conflict neither of them created. What followed changed the direction of the entire crisis. Harry entered the private room at Kensington Palace without greeting his brother. The space had been stripped of ceremony, and both men had agreed that nothing said would be recorded or repeated through aides. Kensington Palace was one of the royal family's London residences, but inside that room it held no authority. There were only two sons, one wounded by rejection, and the other carrying the burden of defending a decision he knew would deepen the divide. William let the silence stand. Harry saw the removal of Archie and Lilibet's status as proof that the family had rejected them. The prince saw it differently. To him, separating the children from official royal identity was the only way to stop their names becoming weapons in an endless institutional battle. Neither position softened the pain. Both made it harder to speak. Harry finally asked whether his brother would accept the same decision for George, Charlotte, or Louis. The accusation landed hard. William looked away before answering that he would fight anyone who tried to use his children's identity beyond their control. He did not deny the comparison. He admitted it frightened him. The prince then told his brother the truth neither side wanted to hear. The family had failed Archie and Lilibet by allowing adult anger to define them. That sentence broke something open. Harry's rage faded into visible grief, and for the first time since the decree, he stopped arguing about titles and spoke only about what his children might someday believe had happened to them. William revealed more in a private recorded conversation preserved for the king's legal file. He had persuaded Charles to include a protection clause guaranteeing family contact, educational support, and private access without public royal obligations. A protection clause was a hidden safeguard written into the decree to preserve personal ties, even after official status was removed. Harry learned that the original order had been harsher. It would have excluded the children from future family gatherings and treated them as outsiders. The future king had removed that language before the signature was given. The decree remained painful, but it was no longer total exile. Harry left knowing the decision would not be reversed. Yet he carried one new purpose. The world would understand that his children had lost a status, not their identity, dignity, or worth. The brothers could not restore what had been removed, but their private understanding prepared them for the moment when the decree left palace walls and became a global judgment. By sunrise, the private grief of one family had become a worldwide argument about inheritance, power, childhood, and punishment. Some saw a king defending the monarchy from commercial exploitation. Others saw a grandfather using ancient authority against two young children. The palace released only 3 controlled sentences, but one newspaper front page captured the emotional force of the moment and transformed the decree from an internal decision into a public verdict on the future of the crown. Charles watched the first morning broadcast without speaking. The palace statement confirmed that Archie and Lilibet would remain members of his family by blood, but they would no longer hold or use formal royal styles. Those styles were the official names and titles showing a person's recognized place inside the monarchy. The statement sounded controlled, yet its meaning was brutal. The children still belonged to their grandfather, but no longer to the institution he led. The nation divided almost instantly. Constitutional traditionalists defended the decree as necessary clarity, arguing that royal recognition could not exist without royal duty or palace control. Family advocates called it emotionally disproportionate, insisting that 2 children had been made to carry the consequences of an adult conflict. Every debate returned to the same painful question. Had the king protected the crown, or had he used it to close a family wound by force? Charles kept watching, until a commentator asked how history would remember him. Would he be praised as the monarch who defended royal boundaries, or condemned as the grandfather who chose rules over reconciliation? The king reached for the remote and turned off the broadcast. He remained seated after the screen went dark, unable to silence the accusation left behind. Meghan drafted her response, with anger still burning beneath every sentence. She included one line accusing Charles of cruelty, but Harry asked her to remove it. He told her that Archie and Lilibet could not become the center of another media war. She resisted, then deleted the words. For once, protecting the children meant refusing the sharpest attack. The public moment came before breakfast. The London Chronicle printed a black-and-white image of the palace gates, beneath the headline, "The Children Without a Crown." Crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace, carrying signs both supporting and condemning the king. One side praised duty, the other demanded mercy. A national broadcaster called the decree the most important redefinition of royal belonging in a generation. The discussion was no longer focused only on Meghan's choices. It had shifted toward the monarchy's power to decide where family ended and institution began. Harry finally released a carefully worded statement. His children, he said, had lost formal status, but they had not lost their identity, dignity, or future. That sentence changed the emotional center of the crisis. The world had delivered its arguments, but the final meaning of the decree would be decided not by headlines, courtiers, or constitutional language, only by how the family chose to live after it. In the end, Charles kept the decree because he believed the monarchy could not survive if royal identity became a private possession used beyond royal duty. Meghan could not forgive the method, but she refused to let the decision define her children. Harry lost the future he once imagined for them, yet he finally understood that status and belonging were no longer the same thing. The crown remained intact, but the family emerged permanently transformed. Charles allowed the final palace records to be amended without delay. Archie and Lilibet no longer possessed formal royal status, and the decree remained in force without appeal, suspension, or promise of future reversal. Formal royal status meant official recognition within the monarchy's structure, including titles, ceremonial standing, and representation by the institution. The children remained connected to their family heritage, but their futures would now exist outside royal service and palace control. The king wrote 2 private letters after the public storm had quieted. He addressed each child by name and wrote not as monarch, but as their grandfather. Charles explained that his decision was intended to remove them from a conflict they had never chosen, even though he knew they might one day see it as rejection. He did not ask for forgiveness. He only asked that they read his reasons before judging his love. Meghan received the letters and held them without opening either envelope. Her anger toward Charles had not disappeared, and the loss of the children's recognition still felt like a wound imposed from above. Yet she placed both letters carefully inside a drawer for Archie and Lilibet to read when they were older. She would not excuse the king, but she would not destroy their chance to understand him. Harry ended his effort to reverse the decree through a recorded public statement. He declared that his children needed no title to know who they were, and no palace approval to understand their worth. He also made clear that Archie and Lilibet would not be used as weapons against the monarchy. That choice did not heal the family, but it ended the battle over their names. William privately asked Charles to honor the protection clause in full. The future king insisted that the children must never be treated as strangers at family gatherings, even though they no longer stood inside the official royal order. The clause preserved personal contact, educational support, and family belonging without restoring institutional status. The verdict was painful, but clear. Charles protected the boundary he believed the crown required, yet the cost was a permanent fracture in trust. Meghan lost the recognition she wanted for her children, but reclaimed the freedom to shape their futures beyond palace authority. Harry surrendered the fight for status and chose identity instead. The monarchy survived, while the family accepted that love could continue only after power had been removed from the relationship. The decree closed the argument with finality. 2 children lost their royal status, a king secured the boundary of his crown, and a divided family learned that titles can be removed in a moment. But the consequences of blood, memory, and love remain for a lifetime. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.